All right, let's jump right into today's explainer. We're looking at a deeply personal, recently declassified document from corporate security expert Melvyn C.C. Valenzuela. This is the incredible story of a man who faced an absolutely insurmountable crisis, and in the process, discovered a framework to survive when all human tactics completely fail. Melvyn wrote a manual detailing his experience, and today, we're going to break down his core concepts.
Now, think about this paradox for a second. We're looking at a 40-year corporate security veteran, a guy whose entire identity, his whole livelihood, was built on anticipating threats and maintaining absolute control. But what actually happens when the ultimate protector faces an internal ambush he simply cannot outsmart?
We're treating this explainer like an executive summary today. Here is the map we're following. First, the ultimate perimeter breach. Next, when strategic tactics fail. Then, the ancestral intelligence blueprint, followed by strategic silence and abiding, and we'll wrap it all up with your tactical 30-day deployment. All right, let's get into it.
Section 1. The ultimate perimeter breach. A security master meets his match. Let's look at the exact moment that completely shattered Melvyn's illusion of control.
Picture this. For literally 40 years, Melvyn relied on what he called strategic tactics. I mean, this guy managed laws, control, and human resources for massive global corporations like Toyota. He built his entire career on the Guardian standard, basically anticipating every conceivable threat and hardening every target. He'd even survived 3 actual physical ambushes out on the streets. He was the absolute master of his domain, physically tough, and always in command.
But then, out of nowhere, June 28, 2025 happens. At exactly 14:30 hours, Melvyn's heart just stops. A totally silent internal bleed in his left thalamus completely bypassed all that physical armor he'd built up. He flatlined. It wasn't until 1700 hours, when his son Jorel rushed in and shouted, "Dad!" that his right hand gave a tiny twitch, just enough to signal the medical staff to keep fighting for him. And by 1900 hours, he wakes up in the ICU.
Fast forward nearly a year, and Melvyn actually walks back into that same hospital to talk to his neurosurgeon. Now, this surgeon also happened to be family and was right there on the day of the bleed. And he gives Melvyn this absolutely profound admission. In all the years of my practice, your case is only the 3rd miraculous incident I have encountered in my entire life. I mean, wow. The medical team had originally given him virtually zero hope, and yet there he was.
Moving on to Section 2, when strategic tactics fail, and the disconnect between left and right. So, what exactly happens when all of our fail-safes and executive security protocols are completely neutralized? You see, the thalamus is basically the brain's grand central station, and that bleed completely destroyed the tracks leading to the right side of his body. He was literally trapped in a divided state. On his left side, alive, moving, reaching, totally anchored in reality. But his right side? It was like a fallen log, heavy, silent, and entirely paralyzed. It didn't matter that he had all these elite professional credentials or 50 published books. None of that could negotiate with a paralyzed right leg.
Melvyn calls this terrifying state hitting 0% battery. It is the total, absolute collapse of human capability. Because, let's be real, there is no backup generator in the human body that can just override a flatline. So, I want to ask you directly, if your health, or even your bank account, hits 0% battery today, what's your redundancy plan? What do you do when your usual go-to tactics completely fail?
That brings us to Section 3, the ancestral intelligence blueprint, and the tactical application of the irration. Let's see exactly how Melvyn rebuilt his command center from scratch.
Instead of relying on standard corporate operating procedures, Melvyn realized his intuition was pulling him toward ancient Hebrew names for God, and he organized these into a brilliant tactical blueprint. Adonai Yahweh became his new chain of command, a formal security handover acknowledging, hey, I am no longer in charge here. Yahweh Rophe, the healer, became his protocol for internal system repair when his physical hardware failed. And Yahweh Shalom provided this operational stillness during the literal bomb threat of his own mortality. It gives high achievers this very tangible, structured way to process something as abstract as spiritual surrender.
But what about when a crisis hits so fast that you literally don't even have time to think? Or when you only have enough air for a few words? Well, Melvyn formulated this incredibly concise one-breath maneuver. Actually, take a breath with me right now. As you inhale, you acknowledge presence, Yahweh Shammah. As you exhale, you claim peace, Yahweh Shalom. And then you recognize the pulse of life, El Chai. It's an instant lifeline. designed to deploy presence, peace, and life right into the absolute kill zone of a crisis.
Section 4, Strategic Silence and Abiding, Finding Stillness in the Kill Zone. Let's dive into a paradox that is, frankly, incredibly hard for alpha personalities and executives to grasp: the tactical advantage of doing absolutely nothing.
Think about it. Melvyn made his living giving orders, publishing books, using his voice to maintain command and control. But the stroke left his speech severely slurred. Now, instead of seeing this as a defeat, he flipped it. He redefined it as strategic silence. It's the spiritual discipline of abiding. It's trusting and just remaining in the presence of the ultimate executive when you physically cannot take action or speak clearly. It's essentially noise discipline for the soul.
Because when you're sitting there in a hospital gown, you have no rank. The beeping machines in the ICU, they do not care about your resume or your risk management expertise. Melvyn had to completely strip away his titles to discover that his core identity wasn't just security expert, it was rooted in something much deeper. He realized that true security isn't about engineering a completely threat-free life. It's about surrendering ownership of your perimeter to a higher power.
And finally, Section 5, your tactical 30-day deployment, the blueprint for the Guardian Vanguard. Let's outline how you can take this exact framework and use it right now to perform a real audit of your own soul. Melvyn actually wrote this manual specifically as Pa'alala ni Lolo, which translates to Reminders from Grandpa. He addressed these deeply personal letters to his granddaughters, Marielle, Margot, and Astrid, and to his wife Marietta, who practically flew across the ocean to be his ground commander during the whole crisis. He wanted to make absolutely sure they knew that true legacy isn't about wealth or titles, it's about passing down spiritual DNA. He wanted them to know exactly what to do when their own strength hits 0%. So here's how the 30-day tactical deployment works. Melvyn breaks it down into 4 highly actionable phases. Week 1 is the foundation, where you actively, intentionally relinquish control. Week 2 is reconstruction, which focuses entirely on healing internal numbness. Week 3 brings us to the front line, where you face those external ambushes, but under a new banner. And the final week, empowerment. This is where you shift from merely surviving to actually thriving by celebrating infinite sufficiency. It's a totally systematic move from complete depletion to true unshakable empowerment.
Look, we spend our entire lives building these massive fortresses of career, wealth, and reputation. But I want to leave you with this. When your personal fail-safes are breached and when your battery hits absolute zero, who is the ultimate executive of your life? Take a moment to really audit your own soul today. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.